Nancy, okay,
What was that about?
and Nancy Fortunato. Please share with us a brief introductions of yourself. Once again, thanks for joining us.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jeanette Vega, and I am the training director at RISE.
Good morning. My name is Nancy Fortunato, and I am the senior parent leader at RISE. So I'm going to go through the agenda. First, we're going to say who we are at RISE, a parent's perspective of the child welfare, why it's important to have parents' involvement in the child welfare, the barriers and challenges, lessons learned, outcome, and then in the end, A and Q.
Q&A.
Q&A, sorry, Q&A.
Well, RISE is an organization that is led by parents for parents who have been affected by the child welfare system. Not working. That's wrong. I'm so sorry. So RISE is an organization that is by parents for parents who have been affected by the child welfare system, and we started out about 12 years ago just as a magazine. And what we did was we wrote our stories. We helped parents tell their stories to reflect on the experiences that they face themselves within the child welfare system. And then lately, for the past year or two, we have been doing a lot of presentations to frontline staff at the Administration for Children's Services, which is the child welfare system in New York City, just to give a parent perspective on what works and what doesn't work for families, and and different approaches that workers can use to assist and guide parents throughout their child welfare case.
It's not working, the slide. Sorry.
We like to say that it's so important for us to have parents involved in the child welfare system because parents are their own experts. So parents that have experienced the situations themselves are the best experts to tell other professionals what will work and what will not work for other families. Our motto enhances the parent voice, and we help parents get their power back. We help parents understand how to navigate the child welfare system. We help parents understand their rights when they're facing the child welfare system, and just giving them information about what is important for them.
Okay. So how we involve parents? Well, many times we do a lot of presentations and trainings to frontline staff in the child welfare system, lawyers like the ones in the Bronx, Brooklyn, and Queens, and attorneys as well. We also have a Rise and Shine leadership program, which that entails the child welfare knowledge, writing and public speaking skills, leadership and advocacy, and through their stories and through their presentation, healing comes along with that. So the barriers and challenges in RISE. Number one, we are a very small organization. So there's a lot of people that want to be involved, but again, we're pretty small, and there's a lot of things going on, like we do a lot of presentations, we do panels, we do trainings for frontline staff. So it takes a lot of energy, and it also takes a lot of motivation, and you really have to be involved a lot, and it's hard to do that when you're a very small organization. And by sharing the stories, sometimes it can be re-traumatizing. So, many parents that are just coming out of the child welfare system, it's really hard for them to regulate their emotions, but it's also hard for them to really heal because of the trauma they experience through the child welfare system, the barriers, the judgments, the shame, and they just got their children home. So it's really hard to recover that and then go into a form of advocacy in a way. So that's pretty hard to do, especially when you're just coming out of the child welfare system.
So I'll just give you guys a little brief history of my personal story. So when I was 19, my son was 2 years old, and I was affected by the child welfare system for 3 whole years because I had hit my son with the belt. I'm Puerto Rican. I was raised old school. So if you get crazy, you just get hit. That's just the way things were growing up. But the child welfare system didn't understand a lot of that stuff. They didn't understand my culture. They didn't understand my community. They didn't take anything into consideration. They just seen me as a bad person and as a bad parent. and that itself kept my son in care for 3 long years. They asked me to do a lot of services, which kind of overcame my life. They expected me to do parenting classes, anger management classes, counseling, and I did all those things so quickly, but I didn't change my behaviors at any point. I was still violent and a little wild, on the wild side, right? I was only 19. So the system saw that all my violent tendency and behaviors came from me being a violent person. So they ended up sending me to anger management 3 times, but the services did not work. Anger management did not help me at all. What I needed was just more time with my son. Throughout that process, I ended up losing my house, my income, my job. I had to drop out of school just because I had to do all those mandated services. Then the agency would expect me to go to visit my son and be at the agency and just be so happy-go-lucky, but I was angry, right? I was angry that they took my son. I was angry at the situation I was in, and what I needed was support and guidance on how to overcome this situation and move on and get my son back. So it was really difficult for me. I think I was really scared of what was happening. I felt like I had no power or control over anything, or I didn't have any say on anything that would happen between me and my son. So I just kind of went along with the case, and eventually I controlled my anger. I had 5 caseworkers, and it wasn't until my 5th caseworker said that, that my actions were the reason my son was staying in foster care, was when I realized that I needed to change my behaviors. People would say, like, you need to change your behaviors, but I didn't understand what it was, so the caseworker was very specific and said, like, you can't hit nobody. You can't keep yelling and cursing at people because we think that you portraying those violent tendencies for us is the way you would react at home if your child was to do something. So automatically I changed my ways really quickly, and my son came home within 6 months. But that's just to say that as parents, sometimes we don't understand what it is we need to do or what is expected of us in order to reunify with our children.
So, as you listen to Janice's story, we would like to, what did you hear in her story? So if you would like to ask or write down in the chat, what did you hear in Janice's story?
No.
Oh, please answer. Okay, so again, she was feeling awful about herself. She was scared. She felt powerless. Feeling so many mandated service like anger management 3 times. Feeling like she wasn't a good mother, because when you come in the child welfare system, many parents feel like this system is telling me that I'm an awful parent, that I'm a monster, and many times that is not the case. But that's what parents feel walking into this system.
Yeah, you guys are so on point. That is exactly what the story said. Definitely there's a lot of pain in my voice, of course. That was my first and only son, so thank you guys for your remarks.
Okay, then next, the negative experience parents face in the child welfare system. So what did you hear when it came to the parents' experience in the child welfare system? I hear she didn't exactly negative impact in her life without real. Wow, that's, yeah, I pretty much agree with your guys' response. Again, yes. So we're gonna put up the answers. So yeah, when you come into the child welfare system, most of the times there is no real guidance. Nobody's really telling you what needs to happen to move to reunification. When it comes to too many services, again, like anger management, DV classes, drug treatment program, mental health assessments, they tell you they want to do all of these service plan, which is called service plan, and many times they're in different areas, and then they don't know what else you have in your plate. So sometimes, you doing all this service plan, but they forgot that maybe you're going to school, maybe you're working, or, now your child's removed, and now you're losing your house, you're losing your income. They don't take that to consideration. And always the threat of removal and moving visits back. Most of the time, they so focus on service compliance, and they feel like if they stop the visiting, that's going to push you to do service compliance. But the protocol for ACS, it says family time is not decided by service compliance. So even though if you haven't started your services, they should not stop your visits, because that's the time for you to bond with your family. That's the time to rekindle the relationship, especially when the family has been written up, separated, and your children is no longer there, which was the main motivation for parents or their children.
Yeah, we would like to say definitely turnover is a definitely big issue. We hear a lot of turnovers, which definitely holds a case lingering, right? So if you get a new caseworker, more than likely you have to wait till that caseworker gets to know the case a little bit, right? Review the case file and understand where you're at and where they need to move forward with you at. I think the big problem is definitely that stigma that one of you guys, lady, had responded. Definitely the stigma of New York City is that, child welfare just takes people's children, and they do not understand how traumatizing that experience in itself is, right? So I can definitely say a piece of my identity was lost once my son was taken away from me, and that's a traumatic experience that till today stays with me forever. So as Nancy was saying, we wanted to connect all the things we was talking about. So a lot of parents, they end up losing a lot of things. So parents lose their employment. I had to lose mine. I had to stop going to school. Unfortunately, at that point in my life, I was receiving a voucher for rent. And when my son was taken from my care, I ended up losing my food stamps, so I had no money for food. And I ended up losing my voucher because without a child in your case, you no longer qualify for that rent assistance. So things got really stressful for me, and the systems, didn't take any of those things into consideration at all, which is important, right? Because these are barriers, and these makes parents think and look like they don't comply. So when parents are facing all these things, they don't know how to cope, right? Parents usually go through all these things, like someone like me for 3 years in a row, repeatedly going over all these stresses was a lot for me, right? My reactions were just to fight people, freeze, act like nothing was bothering me, or just disengage, right? And kind of fly away from the world and act like none of this was happening to me. So people that knew me personally did not know that my son was in foster care at all. So I kind of just consumed myself in my own sorrow. And unfortunately, again, the child welfare system did not care about any of these things.
And also, as Jeanette was saying, many times parents had came from a place of trauma before the child welfare came. So whether it was with incarceration, in the school system, the community they live in, so they already face a lot of adversary and a lot of trauma, even by their own history, generational trauma. And now there's a system that's telling them what they need to do, and a system that's pressuring them. And so it's hard to really engage when you have so many things going on, and especially if you haven't dealt with your own traumas. Okay, so what can professionals do to help parents? So pretty much, ask the parent that this is over more place. Many times parents come into the child welfare system, they don't really know why they came. They heard the allegations, but they're still confused. It's not very clear to them, because first they thought it was maybe educational neglect. Now they're hearing it's trauma. Now they're hearing it's drugs. Now they're hearing it's DV. So they're very confused when they're walking into this system. And so it'll be beneficial when a professional sits down with the parent and really help them understand what's the reason why they're here and what can we do to help you and your family, because, again, the goal is reunification. This is not this is only a temporary situation. It should only be a temporary situation. It shouldn't be a long-term situation, or everlasting situation, and that needs to be really told to the parents, because many times they think, you're going to be in my life forever, and that is not the case. But when you sit down with them and make your expectation clear and help them understand the reasons that you're here was maybe because of some of the behaviors that were not addressed, and made the agency feel that your child wasn't safe with you is the reason why you're here. But how can we move forward and address those safety concerns so your family could come back together again? So that's like giving parents information and written materials, like the ACS handbook about coming into foster care, introducing the parent advocate, introducing what it is, the expectation when they come to visit your child. They tell you you have to come and visit, but they don't tell you how you should visit. They don't tell you what are they looking for when you are visiting with your children. That is not being told.
That actually brings us to our RISE tips. RISE had created visiting tips handouts, and there's 4 different sheets. So 2 of the sheets focus on like the beginning of the case. How do you self-advocate for yourself? What are your rights as a parent? What can you do in visits, right? And the basics of what can actually like hurt your visit, right? So you coming in aggressive, or you being angry like Jeanette was, or you're not coming in on time, or coming in intoxicated, right? These are things that can move your case back, and a lot of the times the system does not tell you these things, right? So RISE created the tips with parents who were affected themselves. So these are from parents like me and Nancy, who have actually visited our children in foster care ourselves. So we know what it's like to sit in that small little room that feels like a jail cell and have 2 hours consumed of just having to be in your child's face. When you think of real life family time, like I'm in the kitchen cooking or watching my Love and Hip Hop show, right? And the kids are like playing their video games, and they're like not in my face. So when you enter foster care, it's a whole different experience on what they're expecting from you, on what visits should look like. So they want you to sit on the floor and play with your child and engage and bond and interact with them for those 2 hours. So what the tips does, it gives guidance to parents on what those 2 hours can look like. How can they set up a routine to give their child, you know, like this is, we're going to eat first, and then we're going to play, and then we're going to talk about how your week went, just to give them a normality within the visit. The tips are very useful also. Caseworkers and professionals have found them useful as well. We have been told that they're great for problem solving. So if you have a case and mom is not attending the visit, or mom doesn't know, right, she may be overwhelmed. She may be traumatized because visiting is so hard to do. I like to say that the first 3 to 4 visits are the most stressful and traumatizing visits that can happen, only because you've been separated from your child. Now you're going to go for the first time and see him after a few days, and it's like, what is he feeling? What are you feeling? Does he hate you? Does he think you don't love him anymore because he's not in your care? Like, all these emotions are so real for families, and not just for the parents, for the children as well. I think the children feel the most, and because they're so young, they have a change in environment, a change in guardian. They don't understand what's happening, and they're so little that they cannot explain it at times, right? So imagine how bad it is for children. It's just as bad for parents, right? Parents go in, they don't know if they should hug the baby. They don't know if the baby's mad at them. They don't know how to consume their own emotions. So the tips kind of helps. It gives guidance to say, like, hey, if you're feeling shut down, you may be feeling a traumatizing experience at this point, and it gives you ways to kind of regulate yourself. You know, take a minute, go take a walk, kind of talk to the parent advocate to say, like, I'm feeling these things and I don't know how to regulate my emotions in the visit, and how can we move forward?
And it's created by parents.
Definitely. We like to say that all our work is all created by parents who were affected. When we do this work, we do like to say that if we do the work, we cannot just start with frontline staff, because as much passion and enthusiasm that the frontline staff has to incorporate our work, unfortunately, if the bosses and the CEOs of the organization is not on your back and don't have your back and you don't have their support in order to do this work, things are not going to move along, right? So it's like you have a parent advocate that says it's so important to include these tips to give parents information, but if the directors and the supervisors don't agree that it's beneficial, then you don't get the support and the push to actually implement the different work that RISE is including.
So the next is like how to empower parents. Pretty much when we talk about the tips, we also talk about, you know, organizing their plan through the week or through the month. Like, this is what it look like. Like, I got doctor's appointment, I got housing appointment, I got visits. Like, help them set up their plan for the month. Give them a calendar. and put all the appointments in there. Provide them the contact sheet, their lawyers, supervisors, parent advocate, their caseworkers, anybody else that's involved in their case. And give them as much written material as possible, like the visits, like Rise magazine that has a wealth of information and resources, also outside resources within their community that could help them, and explain the child welfare process. Many times that process is not being explained in a very clear manner because, lawyers say one thing, caseworkers say another thing, the supervisors say another thing, and now they listen to their friends. So now they are confused as how actually the process goes and how to really navigate the system. Okay.
Great explanation, Nancy.
Thank you. So what will change? If you be transparent and let the parent know, listen, I want to get to know you and your family, and I want to help you understand the reasons why you came here and help you as a team work to problem solve the situations that brought you here, so we could move to reunification. Again, the goal is to reunify families. Help parents understand that the reason they came here was because they negative behavior, and how, like Janice was saying, she was lashing out and fighting, and because of that, they wouldn't move her visits. But they need to understand that if you change your behavior, the sooner you could change it, the better you could reunify with your family. Okay, so changes. Again, many parents feel like if you work with them, they're going to feel engaged. If you put them in the center of the decision-making, if you really understand and say, listen, you are the experts of your own family. We know you know your family more than anybody sitting up in here. And I want to hear what you have to say. I want to hear what works. And I want to hear what you need for your family in order so you and your family get the right support. Parents will feel empowered and will be like, you know what, they care about me, they care about my family, and they care that they want to help us so we could have a better life in the future. And also when workers work with parents, they will feel like the job can be stressful, but it can be rewarding. Because if you could unify at least one or two families, then you are on the right track.
Great. Right. So that brings us to definitely Nancy's conversation kind of all covers building relationships, right? If we start from the beginning of the case to build relationships, we won't have a standoff battle confrontation. There we go. So like when you think about child welfare and you think about parents and caseworkers, the first reaction you would think is like a standoff, right? I'm a boxer, they're a boxer, we're here to fight each other because they're judging me. I don't have any trust in them, and I'm angry and I'm fearful of the system in itself. So I think that everything that the system does, even if the worker is in the best interest, I think she's out to get me. I think she's there to attack me. If we start to think about Rise's approach, we start learning together from other parents that parents are experts in their own personal experience. That will help share power dynamics. A lot of the times, workers are kind of standing over parents and talking to them and mandating them. But like Nancy said, if we was to have a conversation and we build in options and choices, that would automatically build relationships, right? Because the parents will be heard. They will feel like I have a say in my family's well-being. And again, a lot of it is all about communicating positive intentions and being very clear on what is needed from the family. Short-term and long-term, right? So sometimes we say like, okay, Mom, you have a drug abuse problem, and the long-term goal is for you to quit, right, and be clean completely. But for a short-term goal, can we like cut it a little bit, right? You don't have to smoke like every day of the week. Just giving parents realistic ways to kind of navigate their own issues and their own whatever allegations brought them into child welfare. All those things will help in building relationships with people. And as we see, that's me and my cute crew. You guys can't see my picture. Oh, but we do like to say that when families...
Oh, they can. Yes, they can.
Oh, you can see my little cute guys. Those are all my cute boys. That's just to show you that I was affected myself and with my oldest son. And thank God we've never had child welfare involvement in our lives again, right? Because we had support, so we're able to flourish, right? I build relationships with people. I have my parents, his parents, like friends, work family. I think when you have all these different supports in every aspect of your life, your family just becomes stronger.
Barriers, yeah.
We kind of spoke about the barriers, but I think the biggest barrier doing this work is definitely the traumatic impact that you have, right? You know, we're both parents who were affected, and we're also both parents who have became parent advocates. And working within the parent advocate field, it's really hard. You know, you get that vicarious trauma back in your life because you're sitting there and you're trying to assist and support another family who's telling you a story where you're like, wow, that was me a few years ago. And you have to try to learn how to empower parents and just meet them where they at, right? Understand that these are real situations and really, really hard feelings to go through. And just to be a support to a parent that they can overcome this is very big on how parents can become part of child welfare reform. So thank you guys so much for listening to us. I guess we'll open it up now for some questions.
Absolutely.
So thank you. As Jeanette said, we're going to open it up for Q&A. And as a reminder, you can still submit questions through the chat box. And one of our first questions is, you mentioned about the Rise and Shine program. What are the qualifications for being in that program?
Well, the Rise and Shine Leadership Program is a brand new thing at Rise, so we are definitely excited. We incorporated all our programs into one. So we used to run writing workshops, public speaking workshops, and just like training. So what we decided was how to incorporate all three programs into one to kind of give a full experience. So now we do a lot of knowledge on child welfare topics. So we're teaching parents what it's like to talk about toxic stress, what it's like to talk about trauma. When they go into their writing workshop, they get to write their story and reflect their own personal reflection on system changes and reflect on those things that they're learning, right? So how does my experience reflect to toxic stress? How does it reflect to me having a traumatizing experience? And then they go into the public speaking workshop, which really helps them get confidence within themselves to be able to even speak publicly, right? So just being part of the group dynamics really helps them feel safe and secure within each other. And the public speaking director, you know, she supports them in a strong way. So they feel confident, they feel ready. And I think when you do this as a team and you're not alone, and again, we build relationships with our parents so they feel supported. In order to get into our program, there is an application process. We do take 8 to 10 parents yearly. Again, this is our first time running it, so next year will be for February. But you can definitely reach out if parents are interested. We will start recruiting maybe in October or November of this year. And the qualifications are that you have a trial discharge case, your case is officially closed, and you're in preventive services or not, and that you have court order supervision. We want to make sure that parents are ending the case because RISE does not do direct advocacy, unfortunately, on individual cases. So having people with open cases can be really tricky while they're training to become leaders in child welfare reform.
Great, great. Thank you. So our next question is, how can I get a list of tips to provide parents who are involved in supervised visits?
Oh, our information is visible online. We do a lot of presentations to frontline staff. We are contracted with 7 foster care agencies at the moment, and we're implementing the RISE tips within the visiting units. So our approach is that these tips are not just another mandate, right? We don't want workers to give the tips and say, here, this is what you should be doing in visits. It should be an invitation, right? Would you like to meet with me to get information about what will benefit your case? Again, now you're inviting parents, you're empowering them to make a decision, you're giving them options and choices. Do they want to read this? Do they want to move along in their case? It's just a different feeling, and the different feeling that RISE tips brings will build relationships within the organization.
Okay, thank you. So the next question, how does one help a parent understand that no, the child welfare system does not have a goal to just take away people's kids? That's a good question.
Can you repeat that question?
Sure. How does one help a parent understand that, no, the child welfare system does not have a goal just to take away children?
Okay, so number one, the purpose of the child welfare system is to keep children safe. But many times we say in order to keep children safe, you need to support parents. So you need to support parents in order to keep the children safe. It depends on the case. It depends on the allegations. It depends what happened in the case. Sometimes they get their children removed. Sometimes they don't. It really goes case by case.
Yeah, and I would just like to add that I think that's a system question, right? Like, how do we tell the child welfare system that not all parents are bad, right? That parents are facing poverty issues, and how do we give parents primary prevention? How do we put things within people's communities that parents can go themselves and kind of elevate their own crises before they become a crisis, right? Like, these are important conversations to have with the big bosses of Administration for Children's Services, because they have the power to make these changes, right? They have the power to help communities overcome their obstacles that they're facing in order not to get involved within child welfare.
I think also, you know, with the question, how do you help a parent understand that they're just not about taking their child away from them, is, again, there needs to be some type of communication.
Absolutely.
And that's been a myth amongst child welfare for many, many years.
That they're baby snatchers.
Right.
Baby snatchers.
And again, you have to, as you guys said earlier, you have to meet people where they are.
Right.
You know, and so not only does this happen in child welfare, it happens in most of the child welfare, the child serving systems. You know, there's always these myths and things that people say, negative things that they say.
I mean, well, also, you know, let's not forget, you know, a lot of time it's Black and brown families that are being targeted, and it's people that are poor, Black and brown, or just, you know, getting by day, and there comes a sister telling you that, you know, what you're doing is not good enough. But it's good enough because we don't have enough. So we're working with what we have. And now here comes a sister telling you that you need more, but then for you telling me I need more, then you need to give me more.
Amen.
Okay, so another question. Is the RISE program only available in New York City? If so, do you see it expanding?
The goal is to expand, for sure. But a lot of people outside of New York City definitely uses RISE's work. Like I said before, our work is online, and anyone can print it for any purpose. You can use our tips. You can print out our magazines. If you have a parent who's like Jeanette and is angry and doesn't understand, you can, like, print out my story and just have a conversation. But, yeah, all of our material is free to use, and a lot of people outside of New York City do reach out to us to just talk about, like, our perspective and our strategy and our approach on how we do our work.
With the Facebook, too.
And go follow us on Facebook.
All right. So someone wrote, is the magazine where you find the visitation tips? Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Everything's on that website.
Yes, absolutely.
On their website.
Yes. Or nothing else. Okay.
Trying to see what other questions we have.
I guess. Oh yeah. So we're trying to look at your questions, so bear with us.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's handout. Yeah.
What is the most successful story you have come across while working in RISE?
Girl, you know that's an easy question, like my own personal stories. Like, you can't love nothing more than your own stories, right? Personally, like, I'm Janice, so I definitely love highlighting my own stories. I've been through a lot throughout the child welfare system and throughout my journey of becoming a parent advocate. So I definitely write about all those things. I think my favorite story is I'm Rising is called, and it's also on our website. And the reason that's my favorite story, because I talk about how complex it is to be a parent affected and also work with the child welfare system to make these changes. It was so hard for me, and, so definitely you can go on our website. It's called I'm Rising, and that's one of my favorites. Nancy?
Well, I think, all our stories in the Ride magazines are great, because it highlights different situations like DV, mental health, drug treatment, even, some people that, have just being poor and just, struggling and just like not having a family support or not even having friend support and coming into the system feeling alone and afraid. There's many stories like that. So I think most of the stories of Rise, it really hits home because it really tells you the parent side to the story. It is really realistic, but only, it takes away the stigma of like this parent was a monster. Nah, this parent was not a monster. Something happened to this parent that brought her to where she's at now. Right. So we gotta like stop making parents feel like they are the problem. Most of the time, it's not them. This is a systematic situation. Yeah. That's the problem.
Right. So, can you comment on this? I'm continuously struck by how the system perpetuates poverty. Parents have to prioritize services, overworking, going to school, etc.
That is true.
Oh, I'm sorry. And then it says lack of finances get held against parents. It's like a catch-22.
Yeah. Yes, I agree. It can be like a catch-22 because you got a system telling you one thing, but they're not taking consideration of when you're out of the system, your own personal struggles, your own personal goals, and how you're going to meet their goals and meet your goals. Sometimes it does become a catch-22 because it's like you damn if you do and you're damn if you don't.
Yeah, I think the child welfare system definitely gives you that prioritizing, like do you want a life or do you want your child back, right? And I think that's the sad part. Parents, unfortunately, are going to choose their children, right? Like that's their first priority no matter what their situation is. And what happens is that the system tells you to do 50 million services. A lot of the time, the services are not even in the same location, right? So I had to do anger management in like Brooklyn. I lived in the Bronx. My visits were in the Bronx. My parenting class was in Queens. So imagine all the craziness that parents have to go through, right? And then when your child comes home, it's like you're not working, you're not going to school. What are you doing for yourself as an individual? But when the case started, you took all my individual away, right? And then you told me to prioritize. And as a parent, you definitely have to let go of all those things that are your personal goals in order to satisfy the system and get through it.
And I think they just more focus on, again, compliance and not really bringing back the family, not really building up the bond because, sometimes parents have more than one kid. They got 3 kids, and now they're visiting 3 different locations, or now they're doing 3 different things, and then when is their me time? When is all their time is taken away from them, and how can I really sit down and gather all of this that's happening to me and then be able to really be engaging when there's so many things thrown at me all at the same time?
Next question. In what way do you think stigma could be adjusted to better the child welfare system?
I think it's just like what we said before. I think the system cannot say that it's changed. Parents want to see practice change. And I think that is key to changing the stigma. I think if the child welfare system was to announce, like, this is what we consider abuse, this is what we consider a neglect, and kind of informing communities on where they can get assistance and support on these things, offering more primary voluntary prevention, and voluntary is my key word in there, because a lot of the times parents are like, so let's say you catch an investigation. What happens is that if the system still thinks you need to do things, they'll say, we're not going to remove your child, but if you don't do preventive services, we're going to remove your kid, right? So then you have, like, mandated preventive services, or you have court order supervision where people are monitoring you for your life for a whole year. And, yes, your child was not removed, but the surveillance and the intersections that happen with child welfare are, like, so traumatizing that it's hard, right? So definitely having the system change within is key because, you hear a lot about how they're doing great things or how they how they think of themselves as a system. But when the community is scared of you, like, who are you really helping, right? Because the people that you're supposed to be serving are hiding their struggles because they're scared you're going to come take their children away if they say, this is happening to me.
I think many times they need to change their approach, and they need to change, you know, it's not, a lot of times parents don't come because they abuse. It's really because of poverty, like Jeanette was saying. And they need to, like, really define neglect and what's the difference of poverty, because poverty plays a part of neglect, but it's really more poverty. And when they really understand poverty, when they really understand community, when they really understand culture, then they could really change the narrative.
Right.
Absolutely. So our next question, how do you see the agencies you work with changing as a result of your training and partnership?
I mean, with the TIPS project, we have the agency workers reporting that there's like 80, out of 85% of parents are building a relationship with them by using the TIPS. And this has been going on for a year, right? So imagine, and it's not the whole agency, right? We started with a small unit. So for 85% of that unit to say like 85% of families are building relationships, that's a great number. We have about 20 to 30% that says that we actually saw a behavior change because of the TIPS information and the guidance that it's giving, right? So people are understanding exactly what it is they need to do. People are understanding exactly what their visit can look like for them and their children to make it positive and move things along a lot faster. And other agencies want to join us, so that might be like a good result on we're doing a good thing when more want to be involved.
Okay, next question. Are you familiar with the ACE survey? What are your thoughts about including entering the child welfare system as an adverse childhood experience? I'm worried that the trauma in these experiences are often underestimated and minimized.
Yeah, we was talking about that before, about toxic stress and all the adversities that people face. So definitely we are familiar with the ACE survey. Personally, I do not agree that the survey will benefit families, only because it's not clear on what it would mean to child welfare, right? So when you think of something toxic, you're like, crap, let me get away from this, right? So imagine if the child welfare system was to include ACE surveys, they would think that anything toxic is an automatic removal. And I'm scared, right? I'm scared to have that intervened. Right now we are working with researchers to understand toxic stress a little better. We're working with them to think about what language should be chosen. So I've heard that when they do the test, they use it and they're saying like, oh, if you're a Black and Hispanic community, but you can be any race and have high ACE scores, right? It doesn't really matter what your culture is. And I think when they do things like that, again, it brings it back to like poverty families and saying that if you're Black or you're Hispanic, like you're going to face toxic stress or you're more likely to damage your children because of the things that you went through personally. So yeah, it's a scary thing for sure. Also, it can be confused with trauma. You know, we get that a lot too. And people was like, hey, I have toxic stress. That means I'm traumatized. Those are two totally different things for sure. Nancy, you want to add anything?
I don't think that's going to help at all. I think it's just going to be, again, targeting the Black and brown poor people community. They're not they don't target the communities that are enriched with a lot of resources, which is the high middle class community, the rich community that, they could go across the street, there's an after-school program, they playing the drums, then they doing a whole bunch of things. So by the time the mother comes, and they also got like a babysitter taking them to and from school. Like, we don't have that as Black and brown poor people. Right. We don't have the luxuries. They do. So again, I think it would be another set of like,
stuff being used against you.
Not only that, I think that it's also surveillance. Like, now we have one more thing to put in our thing, just to say like, this is why we got to keep surveilling Black and brown people, because they always with this toxic stress, and they don't have no money, and they cannot provide for their family. But everybody at one point in their life are going to come through some form of stressors. Maybe some are more highly stressed than others, but as human beings, just being human beings, we're going to be stressed no matter what. And if that's the case, then we're all going to be suffering for toxic stress.
We all stressed out out here. But definitely the toxic stress teaches you, though, that the main source to overcome is having supportive relationships.
All right, great. I have been shocked to see parents that are afraid to get pregnant because they have older children that were removed, and even though they completed services and have been compliant, there is a threat their new child will be removed as well.
Yeah, unfortunately, there is an Article 14, right? And that just means that for every child that you had in care, every time you get pregnant, there will be a child safety conference to determine the safety of that child. I think it's really sad that people are scared to even, say that they're pregnant, and again, this goes back to the stigma that child welfare has within the communities in New York City. If you're pregnant, you should be able to be happy and say that I'm pregnant, but what's happening is that parents are hiding their pregnancy. They're not doing their prenatal cares because they don't want no report going to the system to say that they're pregnant. And, again, you're jeopardizing people's well-being because they're so scared of this system that's supposed to be there to support them. So,
yeah. Again, it's over surveillance and over policing families again.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. All righty. So, I don't see any more questions. So I'm going to take the time to thank everyone for attending today's webinar. If you have any other questions, please contact us at ctac.info@nyu.edu. Once you leave today's webinar, you will receive a survey of the presentation, and we would appreciate if you would complete that and provide your feedback. On behalf of CTAC and our presenters, thank you for joining us this afternoon, and have a great day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you
Have
for
a great
having us.
one.